Are you ready to think big and act bold? Then you are in the right place. This is Innovative Entrepreneurs, a podcast that will bring you the stories, insights, and tips from some of the most successful and innovative entrepreneurs in the world. I am your host, Erica Bailey, and I am here to help you start, scale, and sustain your own entrepreneurial journey. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to Innovative Entrepreneurs. I am your host, Erica Bailey. And as always, I like to start off with gratitude. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. I do hope that we're able to provide you some value today. And as always, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff that everybody says. Today we have an incredible guest whose work is redefining how design intersects with science and innovation. Joining us is Todd Bracher, the visionary founder of Better Lab. It is a science-driven design platform tackling global challenges through groundbreaking solutions. Todd's impact extends far beyond Better Lab. His award-winning design firm, Bracher, right? I'm saying that right? All right.
You got it.
Has shaped industries worldwide. He's developing transformative products for some of the biggest brands. With 2 International Designer of the Year awards, 24 patents, and over 200 launched products, Todd is a true pioneer in merging design with purpose. So today, we're going to dive into his unique approach, the power of design in creating lasting change, and really what it takes to build a business that challenges the status quo. He also has a book out we're going to be talking about as well. So today, let's get started. Everybody, please welcome Todd to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. It's really nice to meet you.
Same here. Thank you for having me. And that intro seems a little exaggerated. Let me be honest, but I appreciate it. Really pleasure to be here.
Well, I guess we're going to find out, aren't we? So, Todd, let's start with Better Lab. What is Better Lab, and how is creativity and design intermingled with science? Like, help me understand what this is all about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Better Lab is really a response to, so I'm 25 years in this business, and we get awards and pats on the back and celebrated for designing sofas. There's a show every April in Milan, which is sort of the designers Academy Awards in a way, and it's designers around the world ascend and show off their greatest, latest, best designs. And they're sofas, they're coffee tables, they're lamps, they're kind of superficial, and I find it kind of disappointing. And I spent 25 years now in that space, and admittedly appreciating a party for my latest sofa and things like this. But over the years, I realized this isn't really meaningful. And I've gotten, thankfully, to know various scientists, various experts around the world, and realizing, wow, the folks are incredible men and women doing things that you only could imagine. And they're not being celebrated. They're not on the cover of the magazines. And I never really understood that. So it took me sort of a very long journey to realize the mind power when I go to these shows of all these incredible designers kind of working on the wrong thing. And they should be putting their energy into, in my mind, of course, it's nice to have nice objects and things in the world, but put their creative effort into things that are meaningful. And that's really where Better Lab came from.
Wow. Okay. That's pretty impressive. So let's go back a little bit. So Better Lab, you founded Better Lab, right?
That's right. Yep.
What did you do before that? And why did you decide, what was your why for wanting to be an entrepreneur? Or were you always in entrepreneurial mindset?
I was definitely always, I never really had a real job, so to speak. I'm sure you've heard this before from a lot of other entrepreneur types. But I don't think I was an entrepreneur in the traditional way. So I started a service business, and I clearly that's still being an entrepreneur, but that's the idea of servicing with design. And for good 2 decades, I've been servicing companies and various, from large to small, to small startups to giant corporate internet multinationals. So, and it's also kind of frustrating because you're at their whim in a way, like, to unglorify the role, you're a vendor. And so it becomes, it's things that you don't really agree with even. And there becomes moral dilemmas. It becomes quite complex. Whereas the desire to start Better Lab came from this idea of actually what we wanted, what I wanted, where we saw opportunity, as opposed to sort of hearing, oh, that's a really great idea, but you want us to do it. We have to consider that or not. So Better Lab is the venture platform, and my other business, which is Bracher, the consultancy, is a service business. So that's how the two sort of relate to each other.
So I'm looking at your website, and it says that Better Lab is a visionary industrial design partner that co-creates with scientists, technologists, and innovators to shape emerging research and foundational technologies into game-changing products and solutions that improves our bodies, minds, and the world in a measurable way, bringing science to life. Can you explain that? Like, what type of products are we using? Or talk to me more about what the offer is. What are you actually doing to serve?
So I've, as I mentioned, got to know many different types of scientists over the years. And as somebody that, in passing, they'd say, oh yeah, I have ideas or patents or solutions for, around from color blindness to eye health to wound care. I mean, it's a whole host of things. And I would sit there and say, well, why isn't this in the world? And say, oh, well, because, they're sort of an academic. They're there to capture patents, or they're a corporate scientist, or they have it in the world and it's in a poorly designed solution, and there's a lesser quality thing that's winning. And so the list goes on, or it's part of the patent moat or litigation. I mean, there's a million reasons sometimes. And so I have this sort of hypothesis that a lot of the world's problems, for the most part, are already solved. They're living in a drawer, basically, or in this type of scenario where they're not in the world. So the idea of Better Lab is to really work with these folks. So, and to help guide or even co-create in some cases, or directly adopt and adapt existing patents, technology solutions into, and help broker it and translate it into the world. And I think the designer's role is really understanding the market, the sort of user need, and understanding the business and the manufacturing and all this aspect, and really being that translator between the two. So that's ultimately what Better Lab is meant here to do. It's kind of a handshake between these two worlds, between the science, the solution, and the market need, and making sure that they're fully aligned.
Wow. So you really are literally thinking outside of the box, or the drawer in some cases, right?
Yeah, trying to. I mean, I remember, for example, one of the scientists I've known, he's a former NASA guy, and I asked him in 2015 or so, I said, you feel quite stupid, frankly, around some of these folks, because they're, and physicists and PhDs and all this stuff. And designers are people that like play with like color paper and things. So you kind of feel really, at least I do. And so I'm chatting with him, like, well, ask him, well, what is your greatest fear as a scientist? Like, what do you think about? And in 2015 or so, he said pandemic. And I thought, oh, that's typical scientist answer, kind of afraid of everything. And I remember he said, well, he works with NASA and they created different technologies, which we can talk about, then around mitigating virals and pathogens. And he says, because they're very common, they're easy to spread. And he started to explain that, basically helped reveal what was going on around the world long before COVID, and how susceptible we are. So he was very interested in these things. So things like this, I wouldn't think about on my weekends, but that's what he did. And so sure enough, when 2019 rolled around, that was the beginning of a pretty interesting project I'm happy to talk about. So as an example.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to learn more about this project. I mean, it really sounds like you're taking, scientists, they can be very intimidating, right? And so being able to communicate I'm going to relate it to like developers, right? In the marketing world, right? Developers speak a completely different language than a creative or than a project manager. So sometimes that communication can be rather intimidating. Do
Totally.
you find that is the same with scientists who are creating some amazing things out there, or do you feel like you're able to approach it with, I guess, less what's the word I'm looking for?
Like
Um,
ignorance or
yeah, it's imposter syndrome. I talk about imposter syndrome all the time on my show because it's very prevalent in business owners.
yeah, I think I've managed to learn. It's sort of funny. It kind of boils down to the patterns, and the patterns I see in scientists is like efficacy is like one of the main measurements, main metrics for success for a scientist, at least the types that I tend to work with. And so for me, when I speak to them, it's how effective is their solution and why. And like so, it's kind of one of the subjects that once you understand how they see their solution being effective, then you understand them. And it's kind of so the language I've quite picked up, I guess you could say. Uh, and even, to be fair, the same NASA scientist, I appreciate one time I asked him, I said, isn't there a way during COVID? I said, isn't there a way to scan a room with a sensor and see if COVID's even present? And I'm like, you're the scientist. And he goes, sure, if you can do X, Y, Z, and if you have a certain load, enough of it's present, and you do these 3 things or 10 things, you can tell. And I said, well, why don't we just make that? He goes, because it's difficult. And then he started to explain, and then he says, but you can figure it out. And oh, but I'm not a scientist. And then he said, no, but you literally can. You can just go out there and do this research. And I started to, it's sort of the same thing I say to folks about design. I'm like, anyone's a designer. You can, as long as you're solving a problem, you're designing it. So why do we stop and sort of assume someone else is there to solve it? And so it's kind of interesting when he gave me that sort of license. I started to say, okay, yeah, you could, not to the extent necessarily of what he can do clearly, but I think we put our own limitations. So once you start to take those limitations away, you realize we're all from the same, cut from the same cloth, so to speak. So the imposter syndrome sort of goes away, and you just kind of roll up your sleeves and you kind of get in there with those folks.
I love that. Okay, peeps, you need to rewind about 45 seconds and listen to that because I think that is a clear explanation as to how you can break through some of that imposter syndrome when it comes with individuals who you may feel like you are, not in the same caliber of mind wave,
We're their own worst enemies. At least I am. And I mean, same with the business world. I remember, and we can come back to some of the stuff, but in the business world, I remember as a very famous designer, I was working for this guy, one of the top guys in the world. And you, as a young designer, work for them because it's kind of a natural path. It's like he's like a famous musician or something. And when I remember asking him once, I said, "What do you love about design?" Like hoping to hear this kind of some kind of glamorous answer. And he said, the business of it. And I thought, oh, wow, what? Like that was kind of left field because he's if you knew the guy, he's like completely not a business guy and at least not an appearance. And when he said that, I went, wait a second, that's also what I liked about it. And I kind of didn't know how to admit that because it's almost like you're diluting your creativity if you have a business bone in your body. And so yeah, there's things like that. Once you mentally break through and kind of give yourself that license, suddenly you really unlock yourself.
And find something that you can both relate to or connect with. And that kind of takes down some of that veil and builds that relationship organically, which is important, especially if you're going to be working with somebody. So like, talk to me. You kind of mentioned a few some of your projects that you're doing. Are you willing to share some of the stuff that you're working on?
So to go back to the science one, so 2019 rolls around and my friend there has this, he had written a patent, I think it was from long ago, but he's maintained it where on the space station, there's a certain spectrum of light called UVC light. And you've heard of UV light. UV light tends to destroy everything. And it's quite powerful, including humans. It's not healthy for human beings to be in UV light. But they've created a certain spectrum, a kind of far part of the UV spectrum called UVC, created, but have identified. And this is using the space station to clean the environment. So meaning the light is shining in the room, and if there's a pathogen or anything viral in the air, it actually gets deactivated. But the difference is it can happen while you're in the room, and so it's human safe, and that's kind of incredible. So 2019 rolls around, and his idea was we should be putting this in architecture so that your banks and your shops and everything could stay open and be free from COVID. And I remember, and this is where kind of the early days of Better Lab, because I thought, so I joined with him to help create this some of the product design, and as we're going through it, I'm thinking this is kind of it's not great because it's a little bit expensive for what it is. It's kind of far away, contemporary architecture. It's not a little space station, so it's got some challenges with performance at a distance, and just there's some barriers of education, and like people are like, well, you don't see the light, so you don't really know it's working. So there's kind of some human challenges, right? So at the same time, I'm taking my kids at the time, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, like to the store or whatever. And we're, if you remember all the hand sanitizers, the gel, like you're just like pumping this stuff and lathering up in it. And I'm watching this happening, and I'm thinking, what's in this bottle, and I'm it's a lot of water, and there's alcohols, and there's aloes, and there's kind of chemicals. And I don't really know that this is a good idea for like a kid, and like every day for like how long we can do this forever. We're putting these chemicals. So I kind of had these two situations in front of me, and I realized, wait a second, they're kind of the same problem. So what we did was we actually repackaged the science from the room and put it into a hand device. So we're using now light to sterilize the hands. And this makes it much more efficient in terms of actually addressing the problem, because it's not in the room. It's now dealing with where people are touching. So that's actually much more effective. But the bigger win is, and other notes, that it's more effective than a gel sanitizer, because the gel doesn't really get in the nooks and crannies. It's also, gel takes about 90 seconds at best. This takes maybe 3 to 4 seconds to fully sterilize. But the real upside here, which we didn't expect, and this is what's cool about this stuff, and when I say a measurable way, when I say Better Labs Manifesto. So I started kind of poking around, and we learned, for example, a friend of mine, she's responsible for retail at one of the banks here in New York. And she said they were spending about $30,000 per bank. And I thought, oof, to keep the bank open in gel sanitizers. Okay.
Sanitizers?
And that's what it costs.
$30,000 a month?
Because a year.
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's so if you had a restaurant or a shop, like you couldn't afford to maintain this. They're a national chain, so it is what it is, but it's still expensive. So it's this huge, huge burden. And then I was thinking, like, for her, she said, yeah, and have to maintain it. They have like a staff member managing it. They have to clean their space all the time. They can't store certain amounts of it because it's a fire hazard. So they're always dealing with transport of it. And then I started to look into it. And I read a report that the hand sanitizer market is responsible for 2% of the global carbon footprint. Imagine the water use, the plastic bottles, the transportation. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the light wash we've developed just replaces all of that. And it's a one-time object you put there for a few $100s, and it lives there, and you don't have to replenish it. There's nothing to do, and it works better, and it offsets all that negative impact on the environment. So the highlight here I want to share is the beauty of working with a scientist and a designer is that it really marries well. And whereas the scientist, had this incredible idea and this amazing patent and this great technology, but not necessarily putting it in the right place. And myself as a designer, I couldn't invent, of course, this type of solution. So the fact that we came together enabled this to happen. So yeah, that's really why I think it's such an interesting collaboration between science and design.
Wow. So you took a scientific need and found a way to use it in daily life and without being intrusive, or without it sitting in somebody's storage closet because it wasn't doing what they thought it was supposed to be doing. You literally took the science of something, identified user behavior and the need, compiling that with the carbon footprint, you really solved a problem together that can be used for, almost anything in that realm. And now
Hospitals,
all
public
that money
domain.
has been
Mhm.
saved.
Mhm.
The jobs, people are able to put their time and effort into things that are actually making the bank money and not monitoring hand sanitizer. And like,
Right.
that's brilliant. That is
Yeah,
brilliant. Oh
and
my
it's
gosh.
and it's really meant to like help. Again, the mission of Better Lab is it's got to really help folks at scale. And I think all these designers making sofas, like I'm really happy about the sofa. But I mean, if you put all those folks into rooms with scientists, I think we'd have a much different world around us.
Sofas, like couches?
Yeah. It's like not a way to spend our time, if you ask me. But I know where you need somewhere to sit. I get it. But do we need hundreds and hundreds of designers working on sofas every year? I don't see why. But that's what I mean. It's it's like reversely incentivized, right? Like it's when you're young and you're looking to get your name out there, no one's thinking hand wash or something, and neither was I. So to be truthful, so it's just how things go. And I think as maybe a learning for entrepreneurs or younger entrepreneurs, it's this idea was not something that I sat around saying what would be a good business to make. Maybe we
True.
disrupt the sanitizer market. Like that's not how it started. We sort of walked into it from relationships, experiments, failed time. I mean, we worked on the architectural solution for almost 2 years before we realized, oh wait, we can put this in a hand wash device. So it's a very indirect journey sometimes, but you'll find your way.
That's brilliant. Because you're right. Not everything happens just off of a simple idea. There's a lot of the times, like when I do marketing strategies and blueprints, right? Like I have this idea, I have this mind map, how it's going to work. I like, yes, this is what I want. But when I actually put it into action or I build it out within a CRM, I start to see, wait a minute, I need to pivot here. Something doesn't feel right, or this could be done better. So as long as we keep our minds open and understand that there's always room for improvement and having new ideas, even though you put something down on paper already, follow that intuition, right? Like
So
trust
totally.
that gut.
A good friend of mine, he's an entrepreneur and he has a circadian science business. So to translate it, he has a jet lag business, and it's well, one of his pieces is jet lag, but it's anchored under circadian science. And he's fantastic. He would say things to me often. He's like, you have like 2 months advance on it, and it either lives or it dies, and you move on. Like, and instead of kind of people bleed on forever, they're like passion, and they just test it, find out. Like, I don't know, open the store in Midtown and you'll know in 2 months you'll be out of business or you won't be. Like, just find out and then move on. And like, I kind of appreciate that logic. It's like go on the date and meet 10 people and find out who you like. And if you don't, then move on. Like, instead of kind of thinking about it too long, just try out. I think
Call
that's
it
another
test,
good advice.
analyze, optimize. Put it out there.
Yeah.
That's it. Analyze what happened and optimize it for better results.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the best advice that I've figured out, I think for myself, is to kind of run 2 to 3, maybe more. And that's probably terrible advice for an investor to hear. Um, Businesses at the same time, because then you don't really hold it so precious. You're kind of like, I want, 3 of them are moving, or let's even just 2. It's not so precious. You're like willing to kind of, I'm just going to put it out there and keep going because I'm busy. And I think that's
Yeah.
great. Otherwise, I used to be paralyzed about one idea out of fear of it failing and sitting on it forever, as opposed to just do a lot, and you'll find where to go.
Split testing at its finest right
Yep,
there.
that's right. Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like you've worked with some of the world's like biggest brands creating solutions that blend this science and design. So let's go backwards again a little bit. Like, what sparked your passion for this unique approach? And how do you feel your approach has actually, other than this awesome sanitizer machine, like, how do you feel like it has advanced products for these world's largest brands? Am I making my question clear? I'm kind of like throwing a bunch of things out there at you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what sparked it is it's kind of interesting because I applied to design school in 1996. I finished 1992. And I said, yeah. And to get into design school, which I didn't really know what it was, sorry, but I was applying to art school. And to get in, you had to draw a thing and they'd evaluate it and say if you're capable or not. I had to do a couple of different tests. And one of them was I had to design a respirator to live in like the future when the world is impossible to breathe natural air. You have to wear this thing. And it was the kind of sci-fi brief, you know? And okay, so I right away, I'm like, this is interesting. So I'm like, okay, if I'm wearing it every day, so it has to look good. It's kind of a fashionable item. So I'm like, it's not a workshop. It's got to look okay. And then I realized men and women have to wear it, maybe on different sizes. Maybe it's a formal occasion or a work occasion. Like suddenly you start putting the context up. And I designed this whole thing. And then I realized, oh, how could it work? Even I can use this type of material and this, and how do you clean the air on a device with no electricity? And I just sort of invented what I thought made sense. Draw the whole thing. Now it's like a fashion drawing, and I submit it. And I said, I don't know what I just did, but the drawing part, because I wanted to be an illustrator, was kind of the least interesting. It was kind of, I just had to draw it, but the design of it was what was interesting. I got to build, like in my mind, create this solution. And it was this combination of physics and art and all this stuff combined. And so I asked, as I submitted it, I go, I don't know what I just made, but that's what I want to do. And they said, well, that's industrial design. And I never heard of this. So that's what triggered it for me. And thankfully that this was, I guess, part of the master plan from these schools was to help you identify what you like. And so, yeah, this love for science, I've always had it, and in creation and art, and asking kind of common sense, kind of dumb questions, but to truly understand. And so when I start to add those things together, I think it gives me that ability. Like I'm always trying to translate what I see into something that's practical towards a solution. So that really was the seed, I guess you can say, for what got me going.
So you had a direction that you thought you were heading, but during this, during this illustration, or what is the word I'm looking for? It's my ADHD brain, like I talk about
application at the time.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you. You really learned that there was something more to what you were wanting to do.
And I think it's kind of going back a bit to what I touched on earlier. I think there's like core interests that is hard to access sometimes. I think we assume we like something else, but if you really take the minute and say, wait a second, what am I actually drawn to here? I think that's worth doing, because for me, it turns out the science was deeper than the interest in science was deeper than I realized. My interest in business was deeper than I realized. And then it took sort of moments in my life to reveal that, when it was there all along and I could have just paid attention to it.
So you talk about like purpose-driven innovation. So how do you ensure that what you're designing isn't just aesthetically pleasing, but it really does solve these real world problems? And I feel like you've given us examples before, but like, what goes through your mind when you're trying, like, do you start with the design? Do you start with the goal? How do you get to that?
That's the magic question. So I've released my first book, and it came out in June, this past June. It's called Design in Context, and it's on Amazon. It's on Audible. It's on all platforms, and it's the playbook for how you do it. And I've been doing this for now, as I mentioned, 25 years, and I decided to put it in a kind of essay form. It's 45-minute read, and then there's some interviews in there that kind of bring it to life, the kind of practice of it. So how it works is I say design in context, so contextual design. So for example, if I take you to the park, and I point to a tree in front of us, and I ask you, so what do you think about this tree? I don't think, maybe you would, but I don't think you would say, I think that tree's got too many leaves on it, or it's not the right green, or it's too small, or I don't think we tend to think of nature this way.
Okay.
The tree is what it is, and it's based on an ecosystem, right? It's on the rainfall, the climate conditions, the soil, you name it, sunlight, all the factors that shape the tree. And we relate to that because we are also shaped by a context, by an ecosystem. But however, if I bring in the new Tesla or something, you might say, well, I don't like the color blue, or the fender looks kind of too aggressive, or you might have opinions about it because that's an opinion. The car itself is a designer's idea. It's not driven really by anything other than style and shape and some, governmental factors, but like they're it's not as refined, let's say, as nature. And, if I show you a leaf from the tree, I don't, again, think, I even look at the leaf of a tree. Is it beautiful? Like, I don't really think that's the right question, because it actually looks kind of alien if you look at it for a while. And it doesn't really, it is what it is based on what it has to do. It's performing a function. So for me, design and context, the effort is designing the context, not the object. The object will come as a natural result. It's inevitable. But to work on the factors which are critical to shape the result. So when I work with some large companies, small companies, you name it, it could be the legal department, the finance, the patent team. It could be everyone that's involved. Usually is supply chain limitations, market need, customer needs, you name it. When you start to put it all into this kind of soup, what comes out of it is the result that it has to be. So why is it that shape? Why is it that color? Why is it that material? It's because it has to be to solve everything we're asking it to do. That's how we deal with it.
A lot of whys in there.
Makes sense?
I said there's a lot of whys in there. It sounds like you really are just kind of answering all of the questions. Like for me, when we try to build out our strategic funnels or blueprints, right? I will start with like the original, the intent, the goal, and I'll take a whiteboard and sticky notes, and it's constantly like, what happens next? What happens next? Why? And I use sticky notes because sometimes when you're brainstorming and coming up with these ideas, you literally have to move them from place to place to place. Yeah. So understanding and asking the questions and digging deep until there are no more whys to answer, I think helps that purpose-driven innovation and ultimately the best results. Am I tracking with you on that?
Yeah, exactly. You have to, because I can't tell you how many times one of the patterns I see are companies make things without really understanding the market need. And I go, well, what are we doing? Like, we're trying to serve a solution to folks. And by the way, that's how you win in the market, is you actually, sorry to use the expression, scratch their itch. Like you're giving them what they're actually in need of. And you can market something to death. If it doesn't hit the bullseye, you're not going to get there. So almost always it's like these, I hate to sound ridiculous about it, but folks don't really pay that close attention. And I guess that's my obsession with it, is making sure we're actually hitting the bullseye. Otherwise, we're wasting a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources, and a lot. There's nothing, building something is not inexpensive and it's not efficient. So you need to be as lean and as direct and smart as you can, as informed as you can.
And if you miss a hole, like in marketing, if I miss a hole in a sales funnel, like I've spent all that time and now I've got to figure out where the hole is, how to plug it. Now there's extra time, effort, money. Now I'm reanalyzing everything, probably second guessing myself. So if you can really just answer all of the whys, I guess, in advance, there is less likely opportunities for mistakes and for failures because you've literally thought through everything.
Agreed. I mean, people will vote right away. I mean, they'll tell you if they don't like your product or service, then you'll know right away, and you're not going to like it. All right. But on the other hand, if they do like it, if it works well, and if it works perfectly well, if it exceeds their expectations, that's how you get loyalty. That's how you get the ambassador out there naturally. That's how you get organic growth, because your people are talking about it. Hey, did you see how great this thing is? And that's really where you want to go. And I don't think companies really prioritize that thinking.
The cheapest form of marketing is building brand ambassadors.
Yeah, doing it. You could argue, I don't want to promote this to you, but you could shift some of the marketing spend into the development spend, because then you're solving a lot of the marketing there. If that makes sense.
I don't disagree with you, actually. And it's something that we do recommend when I do the strategy blueprints and kind of identify. I'll break down business plans, marketing plans, funnels, websites, user experience. And ultimately, my goal is that my clients are able to decrease their marketing spend because they have developed such a loyal following of brand ambassadors that their product sells itself.
That's right. That's the goal. I agree.
So I was reading your blog, 6 principles of design every business leader needs to understand. And I really think this can really touch wide varieties of different types of businesses. Would you mind kind of summarizing what these 6 principles are and why it's so important to know these in order to transform
I
your
would say,
business?
can you pick one? Because I can go on
Yes.
forever. Like which
Okay.
one? Yeah.
Let's see here. Design is about cultural relevance. It's a vehicle to achieve business objectives, reduce time and money spent on marketing. We kind of touched. I like design helps meet users empathetically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's it goes back to an earlier point, right? It's the idea of scratching that itch, and it's the idea of really understanding your market. And you'd be surprised. There's some Harvard studies in the past that I thought were really interesting, actually, where I won't go too deep into it because it's not the point, but they use the language, why did your customer hire something? So it might be the idea of like hiring, like there was the example of they hired a banana. And you think, well, what does that mean? Or they hired a milkshake in this particular case. And to use that frame, which I always thought was very interesting, and your customers are buying a milkshake, they're hiring a milkshake. So, well, what does that mean? Well, they're hiring it to solve a particular task or a particular service. And it could be, are they hungry? Or like, what is the service? So in the case of the milkshake, they found that it was there was a commute that was happening some point now, I think in Minnesota, where it was like a 45-minute commute, and a banana, for example, they actually asked folks, why are you doing this? And I said a banana was, it was too quick to eat. A chocolate bar or something was like unhealthy, and this other thing was too complicated, but the milkshake was perfect. So people were buying this or hiring it to solve that problem. And so therefore, if you knew this knowledge, you could offer as a competitor a solution that does it better, let's say, than a milkshake, and doesn't have to be a milkshake. So I think about that all the time, like the empathy of the end user, like what is it they're really looking for? And it's not as obvious as I think most people tend to think it is.
You say here, business leaders are reluctant to consistently recognize design as an integral part of research and development. It isn't just an oversight, but also something that negatively impacts their value of their IP, production cost, productivity. Why do you think business leaders would rather spend more money on market research than on the design of their product?
Because I think I actually kind of blame the designers. I think the designers don't speak the language. I think it turns out, I can't tell you how many times, and it's going to sound kind of sexist, that I'd sit in the room and the business leader would say, well, my wife likes red, so let's do it red. And I'm thinking, well, what does your wife have to do with this? Or like, it shouldn't be an opinion of anyone's. It should just be actually what makes sense for the project. And I think business leaders tend to see design as kind of intangible for them, kind of decorative. It's kind of out of their typical language wheelhouse. And so I think until you really get to the folks that truly understand how design can unlock value. And then in addition to that, you have, in my opinion, MBAs are not trained to consider design as really a core function. You have finance, you have legal, you have other aspects, HR, but design is kind of, there's engineering, but there's no design. And I find that curious, where it's engineering may become a design, but to integrate how design really represents the customer, like that should be, you would think, one of the core aspects of how a business advances to a market. And so to me, I think just that simple fact that it's not prioritized, it creates a lot of issues and costs a lot of money to mop up later. Your market sees everything. They're not going to forget those dogs that you let out that should not have been let out. And it costs a lot of money to wind that back. So if you integrate design, 3 years too late, it's going to be an effort to pull it back. You can do it, but you can, Sonos is struggling with that right now. If you haven't, they have this great product and terrible app, And then that happened recently, and the CEO stepped down. I mean, it's a design problem to the point where the CEO had to step down, and the whole company is kind of pulling their hair out that we might be losing the market from a design.
Which could have been avoided if they would have put just as much attention into that
Yeah,
in the very
yeah,
beginning.
that's exactly right. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's just necessary, and let's find a way and mitigate these missteps. I'm not saying it solves everything. We don't know. No one's perfect, but we got to do our best to mitigate them.
I love this. Oh, I could just pick your brain forever. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but let's talk about data. Like, I am huge on data. I love to look at the numbers. So let's talk about data driven design. How does that play a role in creating solutions that are both effective and sustainable?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So I have kind of multiple ways I look at data. I think it's important, and I think, but not to be ruled by it. And it might just depend on the situation. But um, I mean, there's some hard data. There's in this hand wash product, for example, with light wash, we have the ability to scan your hands and to use data to therefore control cycle time, right? That's empirical information. Like it's not, what do we do with it? It's like, no, it's cycle time needs to shift because we found MRSA or something on your hands. So, okay, it's like, that's like one form of data. But I tend to see data as, I think folks tend to see it actually as a way to, confirmation biases to say, okay, you see this, therefore I knew I was right, or I knew it would be this. And to me, that's quite dangerous. I think the way I like to look at data is to try to help it really reveal blind spots. I think the collection of data and how you use it is really important, that it's not confirmation biased, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite difficult. But at the end of the day, I do think data is only as, if this is maybe probably an expression somewhere out there, it's only as good as what you do with it too. And and I think that's the other flip side. You can give all the data in the world to folks, but if they're not able to really convert it and put it in a meaningful direction, then it's in fact pointless.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. Okay, so let's touch on 2 International Designer of the Year awards and 24 patents. Is that right?
I think it was 3 international. I don't know.
3. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
3 International
yeah,
Designer. So,
yeah.
like, what does that mean to you? Like, that to me, that sounds like innovation, dedication, hard work. So, like, what does having those awards and those patents mean to you? And then how do you use that to stay ahead of the curve?
Being truthful, it doesn't really mean anything. I don't know. It's nice, but it doesn't really mean anything. There's no, it means a lot to my clients. It means a lot to like it's their product that we made that gets the award. So like they're like really happy about that. And I think that's great. And I don't have any attachment to it. And I think it's cool that the industry has, ways of acknowledging folks. I don't know if, I guess the lawyer of the year exists. I don't know. Like, I don't know if the accountant of the year exists. So it's kind of fun that there's, tell your friends that you've over beer that you've won something. I think that's kind of cool that that exists, but it doesn't really mean much to me. At the end of the day, it's the ability to do the work that we're doing. And I keep saying I'm 25 years into this, but now I feel like we're really starting to get going because it's taken all this time to build relationships, networks, competence, all this good stuff. And now you can really start to do something. So I know I kind of make fun of making sofas and things, but I think you couldn't do more when I was 25 years old. Like, what do you know? So like
Mhm.
it was kind of the best I could do at the time. And so I think, the awards and things are kind of nice, but it's now I'm really interested in like, how can I put it all together? And I think that's what's happening now.
Humble. So it's not the awards, it's the results that matter.
Yeah, it's a journey, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. A lot of entrepreneurs, they actually struggle to bring their big ideas to life, which I think is a analysis paralysis. And I think it stops a lot of people from venturing on their own because they have an idea, but they don't really know how to bring it to life. So, do you have any advice for others who may be kind of wanting to bring their concept into real world solutions?
Yeah, I think there's 10 million answers to this, or tips or bits to consider. Um, I think, I'm not unique to anyone else. I'm loaded with fear too. And I'm like, oh, what if the world thinks it's terrible? Or what if this fails? There's a million realities there that I tell everyone else, just don't be afraid. It's easy to say, just, get out there and throw it out there. But I think real meaningful advice here is to, spin it up as best you can. But I don't think put the fear of, I think folks, my advice I'm getting at here is I think there tends to be, you go from nothing to like stand it up, build it, launch it, and then be fearless and get it out there. I think that's just going from step 0 to step 1 million without considering all the steps in between. So I guess you could say my advice is take one step at a time. And the next step is like writing it down. Okay, cool. And then now go to the next step. And that's really my advice, because you could be overwhelmed by getting step 1 million and have all the fear in the world, but know you'll land on your feet. You'll know you'll figure it out. Like, you can't be concerned with the unknown. So just take that one step at a time, being the present and solving every step as you go. And I think that to me is advice I would like
It's
to
like
pass
that
along.
whiteboard and the whys and the what's next
Yeah.
that I was talking about earlier. And that first
Yeah.
step, guys and gals, that first step is saying, yes, I'm going to do this. That first step
Yeah.
is saying, okay, I'm ripping off the Band-Aid. I am going to do this. And the rest kind of falls in a pattern from there. But once you decide, you make that choice. That's the first step.
And I would argue you might have I'm 99% certain of this. You might have a pretty clear target, but there is a million steps between the starting line and the finish line, if there ever is a finish line. And I guarantee you it's a different destination than you realize. So don't even worry about the destination. You can have a general direction. That's clear. You need one, but don't get hung up on, oh no, this isn't tracking that. Like, follow it, understand it, be open to it, and be adaptable. And you might end up creating from light from a room to a hand wash, and you not in a million years would have seen that path. But once you go through it, it makes total sense.
There we go, full circle. That was freaking awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna let you jump up here in a second, but I do want to ask you, who has influenced your approach to innovation the most? And what are the biggest lessons you've learned from them? It is called Innovative Entrepreneurs, by the way. So it's a hard one.
It's a hard one. I mean,
And it doesn't have to be an engineer or a scientist. Like,
sure.
I've had people say Genghis Khan. Like, who do you think has inspired your path to innovation?
I mean, it's Charles Darwin. And I think about this all the time, because even this philosophy, I have this framework of design and context. It's how he saw and how he communicated the finches on Galapagos. They all have a different shaped beak based on a different function. And one's eating nectar, one's eating insects, one's between grass, between bark, you name it. And I remember seeing this, and he had a sort of graphic that showed all the influencers that, shape the finch. And then I realized, oh my God, that's how I think. And so that really helped me believe in what I was doing made sense. And so, yeah, for sure, it's Charles Darwin.
That just gave me chills. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Okay, so let's talk about your book one more time. Give it a plug and let people know where they can find you. Or, who should be reaching out to you? I guess, like, who is your avatar?
Cool. So the book's Design and Context. It's a framework for strategic differentiation. So that's really what this book is. And it's out there on Amazon, Audible, all those platforms, Barnes and Noble, etc. And so yeah, give it a look. It's like an essay with some conversation inside. It's an easy read, but I think it's insightful. And it's really for innovators, entrepreneurs, business leaders, folks that really want to leverage design, but not through a sort of an opinion, sort of cosmetic lens, but really at a structural level, and how we can really leverage this idea of contextual design to help drive business. And the folks, you can find me on toddbracher.com or betterlab.com, and of course all the socials. And yeah, I'm really always open to find folks that are really trying to bring products into the world. I'm a hard good person. I'm not an app or digital creator, unfortunately. Sometimes I wish I was, but I do stay in my lane there. And I'm always looking for folks that either work for a firm that would like to help, energize their design studio. I work with them, but I also can be the design studio and innovation studio. So it's, I kind of work in a variety of capacities. So that's my story.
Well, I am so grateful that you joined me. You offered so many phenomenal tidbits and life lessons I think that are going to be pretty valuable. So thank you very much. I'll make sure all of your information are in the show notes. And if there's anything else you want to add, otherwise we will sign off.
Oh, thank you for the chat. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Wow, what a great episode. I hope you had as much fun as I did. If you want more of this goodness, make sure you subscribe so that you get notifications for future podcasts. And if you found value from this, please share it with others. You can visit our website at cwgdigital.com. This is Erica Bailey. I am your host, and I will see you next time.